renovate and rehouse India's art and cultural heritage and translate those ideas into on-ground execution of many of the key projects. So I'd like to now invite Mr. Govind Mohan to please give the keynote address.
My senior colleague and secretary in the Department of Pharmaceuticals, Government of India, Srimati S. Aparna. My dear friend, Shri Adil Zainul Bhai, Chairperson of the Capacity Building Commission. Distinguished colleagues and representatives from the Supreme Court of India, from the Department of Posts, Ministry of Railways and the Ministry of Tribal Affairs. Let me welcome you to this panel discussion, which immediately comes after the high point of this three-day International Expo, which was the keynote address of our Honorable Prime Minister. I take this opportunity to congratulate you all on this 47th International Museum Day. It is indeed a proud day for curators, artists, researchers, educationists, and all those who are privileged to work in this very interesting sphere. This year's celebrations are even more special as India heads the G20 presidency. The International Museum Expo is designed to initiate a holistic conversation on museums and to enable them to evolve as cultural centers that play a pivotal role in India's cultural diplomacy. We have also entered the second phase of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, an initiative of the Government of India to celebrate and commemorate 75 years of independence and the glorious history of its people, culture and achievements. Akin to the unsung freedom fighters is the role of the legions of museum professionals as custodians of our history, heritage, art and culture. Museums are powerhouses that have the potential to recharge a nation and inspire new generations. They serve as a bridge between culture and communities by making people aware of the common belongingness of the past that they share. Their primary role as a disseminator of knowledge provides an impetus that ignites young minds and nurtures curiosity. Modern museums have something to all visitors, young or old, educated or unlettered. While museums cultivate and cherish the past, it is imperative that they also look towards the future. It is a matter of pride for all of us that our museums have continued to grow and evolve and incorporate sustainable development goals, technology and innovation have kept them ahead of the times. This year, the theme of the International Museum Day is aptly Museums, Sustainability and Well-being. As key contributors and trusted institutions, as part of our shared social fabric, museums are uniquely positioned to foster positive change. They support climate action, foster inclusivity, tackle social isolation, and boost mental health. The Lifestyle for Environment mission that was introduced at COP26 in Glasgow in 2021, calling upon the global community of individuals and institutions to pledge mindful and deliberate utilization instead of mindless and destructive consumption, is also in line with this year's theme. The Ministry of Culture is the parent ministry for the development of museums in the country and provides financial assistance to other central government ministries and departments, state governments, autonomous bodies, PSUs, trusts through the Museum Grant Scheme and the Scheme for Promotion of the Culture of Science. Over the last decade, we have facilitated the setting up of 383 museums, one-third of the total number presently in the country. We have also digitized over 3 lakh objects under the Jatan project in order to democratize museum collections for visitors and researchers alike. While our museums undertake robust public programming, inviting more people through their doors, the Ministry of Culture is also developing cultural spaces in 5 cities across India. in Delhi, Mumbai, Ahmedabad, Varanasi and Kolkata. The Mumbai iteration Costume was launched on March 19 this year with a celebration at the Gateway of India. In this connected world we live in today, technology and its rapid growth has led to creating processes for the preservation and propagation and proliferation of culture much easier, thereby reaching a wider audience. At this Expo, between original pieces, digital versions and physical replicas, you get to visit the collections of more than 20 plus museums and institutions across the country. The Conservation Lab showcases a step-by-step process of determining the status of the artifact that needs to be conserved and its specificities. Finally, the confluence of painted media and sound gives a more enhanced experience of artwork being presented in the Ragmala exhibition. The exhibition brings together physical Ragmala series of paintings portraying seasonal and musical references with an addition of the corresponding audio rag embedded in each painting to enhance the visual experience of art with the auditory experience of music as a digital tech innovation that value adds to audience immersion. And finally, the plethora of vendors showcasing futuristic and immersive technologies at the Techno Mela is testament to the fact that museums of the future will make the shift from artifact to audience. By witnessing such a wide celebration of museum programs, we will be nudged towards a deeper understanding of the great cultural collage of this nation. So as we usher in the Amrit Kal, our vision for museums in 2047 remains steadfast. Our focus remains on the 4 Ps: programming, publishing for professionals and public, through thoughtful curation and storytelling. With that, I now declare the stage open and look forward to hearing from my friends and colleagues from other ministries, from other sectors, and from other walks of life. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mohan, for sharing your thoughts. Thank you also for the enormous support and stewardship that you bring to this particular sphere. As I mentioned earlier, ladies and gentlemen, we're really delighted to have such an interesting panel of speakers join us today, and as they will share their experiences. We'll get to hear from each of them as they share their knowledge and experience with us. We have with us the Capacity Building Commission, which facilitates preparation of the annual capacity building plans for all the ministries and the departments. And we've got Mr. Adil Zainul Bhai, the chairperson, with us, and I'd like to begin with him. Mr. Zainul Bhai, do we have adequate museums? And if you say that they're not adequate, what have we done to develop these across the departments? If you could please throw some light on them.
Thank you very much, and thank you to my colleagues on the stage for inviting me, and Govind, thank you for giving me a chance to talk. Honorable Prime Minister raised a very interesting idea on museums. As you think about how many museums do we need, he asked whether every household could create a museum.
Correct.
Right? Of their own, of things that were interesting for that family or for that environment. So in a sense, if we broaden our minds to what a museum is and what it's supposed to do, I think you could say we need infinite museums. There'll never be enough. I think China has 10,000 or 15,000 museums, but the PM's view is that we should have 300 million museums. That's how many households we have. So I think we can break that down to why, what is the purpose of the museum and what would we like it to do. And I'd like to highlight that.
No, don't be distracted by the workers who are working in the back.
I thought somebody was shouting fire or something. No. So, and I'd like to start out by saying one of the most important roles of a museum is to allow every citizen of the country and every visitor to have a unique understanding and interaction with the history, with art, and with crafts, and with culture. And how you do that, in the past we did that by collecting various artifacts and housing them in one place because that's the best way we could look after them, and then allowing everyone to interact with it. And when we did that, you know, we have museums that attract 100,000 people or 1 million people a year, and the Abu Dhabi Museum said that they got 1 million people. You know, in comparison to that, one of our big temples in India, any one of our big temples in India gets 50 million visitors. At one, you know, the Taj gets something like 7 or 8 or 10 million visitors. And I think we have to think about this as, no matter how brilliant a museum is, it doesn't reach everyone. It's just not possible to reach everyone. And so what can we do to change that and get everybody to interact with the museum? Why can't 1 billion people interact with the Indian Museum? Why can't 1 billion people interact with the best collections that we have in India? So the access, so when we talk about number of museums, I think about access. If every one of us could get access to your mascot, right, which very few people have actually seen the actual statue. Now maybe they'll see a lot more. But why couldn't we, you know, could we get 1 billion people to really, really see the Ashoka Chakra, to really see the lions and interact with it at its original scale and size? Then the museum, sort of museum, has served its purpose. So I think we shouldn't count on how many museums, although we need a lot more, but count on how many people have experienced it, how many children have experienced it, how many adults have experienced it, and how they're getting the value and benefit of what is out there. And when we do that, then really we will have achieved it.
Yeah, so coming to your point about, you know, making it as accessible and available for people, immersive experiences are really not foreign to us. I mean, we've got large installations, we've had cathedrals, we've got palaces, all available to us and made by our artists. And yet, in the recent decades, we've got art primarily being exhibited in this white cube, as it were, in a very antiseptic, in a very cerebral and anonymous setting. Do you think that we need to bring back the immersive experience, bring back that for public fascination and for public interaction? And are our museums equipped for doing that?
So I would say that I don't think we should bring back the past, but think about it in a better way for the future and make it immersive and make people experience it. And the great advantage, and I'm glad you have a techno hall over here, right? So the beauty of using technology is you can make experiences immersive in a way that we couldn't do in the past and we are not doing today. For example, you know, many people visit the Red Fort, quite a lot, and they walk through it. But in a very short period of time, we are able to create a virtual reality walk through the Red Fort at a time when there were people living in it, when the armies were there, when the kings were there. We can take the universities that you just showed. I think a picture of some of our ancient universities in your new museum. You know, wouldn't it be great if everybody sitting in their home could walk through those universities? You know, what it looked like when those universities had 5,000 monks over there, right? So I think we have to leapfrog. Don't go back to the old immersive experiences. Can we create new immersive experiences so that it brings it live for a very, very large number of people and they can feel it in a way that you couldn't feel it? And with new technologies coming, you will not just see it in 3D, but you will be able to smell. You know, you can get the smell, you can get the feel, you can get the light, and all of that, and then you really get an experience that we've never had before. So I think I would say we have a great opportunity to use technology to make immersive experiences for everybody available, and a very large number of people will be able to do that. Thank you.
I see that Mr. Subhanj Pant has arrived. May I request Mr. Pant to please join us up on stage? Mr. Zainulbhai, I'd like to just probe a little deeper and ask you if you have, if you envisage a future for the museums of India. I mean, what do you see if you do look at, 20 years from now, what do you think a museum is going to be?
We have as we look ahead in Amrit Kaal and to 2047, one of the things that Honorable President encourages us to do is to say, in many fields, we be not just catching up, but we should be better and we should be than anyone else and set the standard. We are also very strong in digital technology, and we are setting the standard for the world in digital public goods like UPI, Aadhaar, etc. So I think when we think about museums, I think our challenge should be, why don't we should create the museum experience in the museums that is better than anything in the world. Today, if I look at if you ask anyone around the world, not museum professionals, but just people who go to museums, to name their top 20 museums and their top 20 experiences, no Indian museum is part of that.
That's sad.
I think 20 years from now, we should have such interesting and different museums that people that we are setting the standard for the world. I don't think we should create a Louvre. I think we should create something better than that, using the technology and some things that are new, and we fully have the capability to do it. We fully have the artifacts to do it. I think you have a better collection in terms of numbers than the Louvre. I think in terms of art, objects. So we should not aim to be just a museum. We should aim to be something new. And maybe we'll come up with a great word for it. Govind always comes up with a great Hindi word that, and maybe around the world they will say, gee, can we have one of those? I think that is what we should aim for. And I'm completely convinced that we can get there. It requires some imagination. It requires a little bit of money, but not as much as some others have spent around the world. And in 20 years, I fully expect that one Indian, whatever, you'll come up with a wonderful word of it, will be among the top 10 museums.
As they say in India, aapke muh mein ghee shakkar. I hope that this comes true, and I know that Mr. Mohan is probably already planning out his next move. Ladies and gentlemen, India is blessed with a long coastline, and it would therefore seem logical that there will be plenty of maritime history that needs to be chronicled, which needs to be studied and to be conserved. And we've got Mr. Sudhansh Pant here, Secretary, Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Waterways. And I'd like to request him to please throw light on the existing maritime museums, if there are any, or is this limited to the naval forces? Do tell us if there are.
Namaskar. Thank you for this opportunity. The maritime history of India, it goes back to around 5,000 years. The Harappans were the first to develop the maritime trade contact, and the archaeological excavations have shown that shipbuilding activities were existing in a place called Lothal in Gujarat, about 100 kilometers from Ahmedabad, where a dock has been excavated, it has been restored, it is still there at the site. And in the Harappan age, the huge revenues were collected from the maritime trade, and the Greco-Roman trade contact helped the Indians to develop the second urbanization around the 4th century BC. The iron and steel technologies traveled from the Indian subcontinent to the Korean peninsula around 1200 BC, all through the maritime route. The Cholas, the Pandyas, the Marathas and Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, they developed very strong naval power, and which was used not only for security but also for trade and protection of resources. And Buddhism traveled to China, Korea, Japan, Southeast Asia through this maritime contact. So historically, the Indian maritime trade and contacts have had a very significant role. Unfortunately, in the present day, we don't have any maritime museum worth its name in the country. So that is why, with the inspiration of Honorable Prime Minister, a project was announced in Lothal, which is the site of the ancient Harappan ancient Harappan city, and as well as the dock which has been discovered there. Of course, now the sea has receded, and now this Lothal place is about 20 kilometers away from the seashore. But in those days, it is believed that the sea used to be right up to the Lothal point. So this was announced in the budget of 2020, and a very grand museum is coming up in Lothal, which is being implemented by the ministry.
Do tell us more, sir.
Yes. So this museum, this complex, it's a very huge complex, measuring more than 375 acres. It is going to have 14 different galleries. One on orientation and oceanic mythologies. Second one on Harappan pioneer seafarers. Third gallery on post-Harappan trajectories, the impact of climate change. Then India's contact with the Greco-Roman world. Then there's a special exhibition gallery. There is a gallery on journey of the Indian Navy and Indian Coast Guard. There is a trade and cultural relations with Southeast Asia and beyond. Then a gallery on the maritime traditions of Gujarat. Then one on the age of Emporia contact. Then one on Maratha naval power. One on the arrival of the Europeans. There is a children's gallery. There is a gallery on the traditional shipbuilding and navigation techniques of India. And there is a gallery on Indian shipping post-independence. So these are just the galleries. Apart from these galleries, some of the other important features which are coming up. The entire Lothal town, the 5,000-year-old town, is being recreated as a model, as a miniature. Then there's going to be a 5D dome auditorium. Then there is a Bagicha complex. There's going to be a lighthouse museum. And it is going to have one of the world's highest lighthouses actually installed there. Then there is going to be an underwater marine museum, which is one of the biggest in the world. There will be a nature conservation park. There will be 4 theme-based parks. One maritime and naval theme park, one monument theme park, one climate change theme park, and one adventure and amusement park. There's going to be a maritime institute and hostel. There is going to be a Lothal city with a real-time experience of the civilization. There are going to be coastal pavilions of all the coastal states, which are going to be developed by the respective states and union territories, the 9 coastal states of India. And they will showcase not only the maritime culture, but also the general culture, arts, festivals, etc. Then there is a hospitality zone which will have a museotel, which will be a hotel, which will be given out on public-private partnership mode, plus a maritime theme ecological resort. Then there will be a Navy gallery, which will be outside. There's a Navy and Coast Guard gallery inside, and there's a Navy gallery outside, which will have artifacts like the INS Nishank, the Sea Harrier jet plane, a war helicopter, missile launchers, etc. So the entire complex is being designed in a very grand manner.
Has work begun on this?
Yes, the work has begun. Tata Projects Limited is doing the work. Phase 1A of this project, we are hoping to get it inaugurated by January of 2024. The Hafiz contractor and company is the project management consultant and the chief designers for this project. It is coming up in a very big way. It's going to be 3 years down the line. It's going to be an entire, people can come there, spend a full day. There's going to be a resort, there are going to be hotels, parking for some 1,500 vehicles, etc. So it's going to be a destination in itself. That is how it is being planned, and the work started in March of last year, and project is being implemented in phases. So it's coming up in a very big way, and the grand vision of the Honorable Prime Minister that we are trying to implement and recreate on the ground. So that is some general information which I wanted to share on this great museum which is coming up. And internationally also there are very few maritime museums in the world. There is one in Denmark, one in Netherlands, one in Australia, one in China, one in San Diego, USA, one in Sweden, one in New Zealand, one in Greenwich, England, and one in Istanbul.
So apart from Lothal, are there any other maritime museums that we have in the country?
In the country, as I said in the beginning, there are very, very small scale and limited number of museums. There's a small museum in Chennai, there is one in Visakhapatnam. So likewise, there are very small museums, nothing compared to the scale in which we are planning this grand museum now.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, not many of you will be aware that the High Courts and the Supreme Court of India also have museums that preserve and showcase valuable materials on the judicial and administrative system of the past. Many High Court museums have large collections of 400 to 500-year-old rare documents comprising of judgments, of decrees, of orders. And we've got with us the Registrar of the Supreme Court of India, Dr. Uma Narayan. Ma'am, could I ask you to elaborate on the 10 museums in High Courts across the country and about the management strategies for this?
First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'm glad to represent the judiciary. I think this is the first time judicial museums are represented. I am Registrar Museum of Supreme Court of India, and in Supreme Court we have an exclusive museum wherein we have the judicial records, the artifacts, and the Supreme Court Museum has some of its own, and many are borrowed from the High Court, select High Courts. About the High Courts, I would say that the chartered High Courts have large collections. They have like Bombay, Madras, and I guess Calcutta should be having a lot of records, but unfortunately they don't have a museum. But Bombay High Court, we were fortunate enough that Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji had inaugurated it in 2015, and there we have shown the legal history of Bombay, and then we have extended the portion where 2019 we have extended a portion where we have shown the ancient history of Deccan, the medieval, the Maratha period, the judicial system during the Maratha period, during the Peshwa period, and of course the Portuguese period. Then the connection will lead to the English period, which we had covered in the main museum.
So are these all physically represented, or is it digitized now?
It is now presently all are the traditional museums. But I would like to mention here the vision of our Honorable Chief Justice of India, Dr. Dhananjay Chandrachud. His vision is that we need to set up a national judicial museum and archives, and we are at the planning stage, wherein Lordship feels that we should include technology, use AR, VR, AI, and have interactive exhibits, wherein we are going to portray the legal luminaries, and also give some important cases, the well-known cases, which might be interesting for the common man. The basic thing is to reach the common people. They should know what is the legal history, what is the judicial history. So we are at the planning stage, and I hope if that works out, we need the support of Ministry of Culture. We will very soon come to you. So once that is there, I expect that should be a state-of-art museum, wherein we are going to include all the high courts also, not even high courts, but all the district courts. Like many districts are having their own historical documents, like in Maharashtra. I'm sorry, I'm talking about Maharashtra and Bombay more, because I'm basically from Bombay High Court. I was heading the museum there too. I was there while the museum was being set up there. And now I am in Supreme Court on deputation, so we are also having the library.
So tell us a little more about the Supreme Court collections. What is the kind of material?
Supreme Court, we are having 2 galleries. It was formally inaugurated in 2004 by the then Honorable Chief Justice V.N. Khare. And in ground floor and the basement we are having, the ground floor shows the evolution of the Indian judicial system. And on the basement, we are showing the history of the Federal Court and then how the Supreme Court came into being.
And all these museums are open to the public?
Yes. Presently, some work is going on in our Supreme Court Museum, so it is closed for a while. But all the High Court museums and the Supreme Court Museum are open to the public. Regularly, the law students and the school students and the visitors are there. Every Saturday we have it in Supreme Court Museum, we have the visitors, we permit them because the courts are not in session on Saturdays. And of course, other museums, there are regularly there. Recently in Orissa, Honorable Chief Justice Muralidhar sir has come out with a very beautiful museum, Judicial Museum in Cuttack. They have converted the old Chief Justice's bungalow into a museum, and where they have given all the legal history and also the district court records. Some of the interesting records there. Sorry, I have not yet been there, but very soon I'm going to visit that.
So exciting times ahead for the judiciary. I'd like to now move to the Department of Pharmaceuticals, and we've got the Secretary, Ms. Aparna, here with us. Ma'am, could you tell us a little about the development of museums that may be perhaps more scientific than, and particularly of your ministry, they might be more scientific in nature than the other museums that we've talked about so far?
So thank you, Riniji. And first of all, I would like to start by commending the Ministry of Culture under the leadership of Secretary Govind Mohan and his fine team that is present here for having organized this. I think this is probably the first and probably the largest international museum expo that we have seen recently, at least in India. And I do hope that it is a sign of things to come in terms of the attention that we are able to pay to this huge heritage that we have in terms of tangible heritage, of course, and also the cultural heritage. Normally, you are right in mentioning that, heritage is something, or museums are places that we associate with history, with heritage, with culture. But there is also a huge potential for, and in fact, existence of museums that go into the history of the sciences. In the Indian context, we have the National Science Center, the Indian Science Center, of course. Right here next to Crafts Museum, there is one. And I do believe that individual sciences have small collections that may be exhibited in the form of the heritage of that science. I am currently Secretary Pharmaceuticals, so I will be able to speak about that sector. And pharmaceutical is a science which is not a pure science. It is an applied science. It has a lot of biology, chemistry, etc. in it. A lot of clinical aspects are also covered. And we are lucky in the sense, fortunate, that we do have what we call a pharmacy heritage center. Not exactly a museum, but a pharmacy heritage center. But because it is technical in nature, there might be challenges that you have when you face for the particularly for the pharmaceutical. So what I would say is that having visited that heritage center, and it's a small one can see that one needs a kind of a continuum from the heritage of that science to the current status and the future potential or emerging technologies in that science. So for example, the Pharmacy Center, Heritage Center has prehistoric, proto-historic, ancient, medieval, colonial development of the pharmacy science. It has the Indian systems like the Ayurveda and the Unani sections. It also has what we know as pharmaceuticals in terms of chemically synthesized products. So, and like Umaji mentioned, it has a gallery of the luminaries. So we know who are our ancestors, so to say, or forefathers who have contributed to the development of the science. So it is not exactly a technical museum, but I do see the potential for developing museums that can showcase technological advances both in the past and those that are emerging. I believe it will be an addition or its contribution to the development of this sector among museums.
It's an eye-opener for me, someone like me who, probably is not aware of something like this. But, this is a question that I have, that how do you generate interest in people who perhaps have not, even come across an idea like a pharmaceutical museum? I mean, I would have thought of it as a technical museum. It is a scientific museum. So how do you generate interest and get footfall?
I think one challenge is that many of these museums are located within the premises of either educational or research institutions. So access, as in the case of the courts, does become a little challenging because you have students and faculty on campus. So that is the physical challenge of making it accessible to people.
But are there outreach programs?
Yes. So the second challenge is the lack of awareness. And since Govindji has, titled this discussion as Breaking Silos, I do think that this can be a watershed moment for the Ministry of Culture to take leadership in creating a portal where museums and heritage centers located in different ministries and departments of the Government of India, and maybe even the private sector, can have a presence on a portal so that there is greater chance of somebody coming across the existence of that. There are museums like Rail Museum that I'm sure, Veena-ji will talk about, or the National Philately Museum, which are better known because there are aficionados, right? There are stamp collectors, there are train spotters, but you wouldn't have somebody for a museum on, let's say, plasma research.
No, so it would help. I mean, it's interesting in terms of Ayurveda, it's interested in terms of, Unani or Siddha, whatever it is.
We have photographs of the original building of Dabur, for example, set up in the 19th century, already more than 150 years old. So it would have public interest if we had an option or a possibility of reaching out through a common portal which has got greater visitorship and greater visibility.
So you're adding work for Mr. Ward to kind of, take cues from. So
Adding pleasant.
yes, absolutely. I think the ultimate gain is for our people, and I think that is something that we should not let off on. I'd like to now go on to, you mentioned the Rail Museum. We've got with us Vineeta Srivastava, who's the Executive Director of Heritage at the Railway Board. Ma'am, the Rail Museum in Delhi is the first transport museum in the country. What was the purpose of creating a museum of this kind? It's on. Just
end of the 19th century and 20th century movements. So it will show movements of all parts of the country. In fact, our purpose is that in the national museums, then people come to the national museum, then they not only see the regional issues also, but they also have a feel of the tribal culture. So this museum is going to be ready by next year. So Secretary Culture and his entire team, and we have a national level committee who are working on the curation part as well as the building part. The civil part is complete. Then we have two more museums in Madhya Pradesh. One is Badalpur Museum in Chhindwara and Shankar Shah Museum in Jabalpur. Jabalpur Museum, Shankar Shah Museum is also a restoration of the area where Shankar Shah was present. So that will be ready by this year. And Badalpur Museum in Chhindwara is also under construction. That will also be ready by this year. Then in Northeast also we have one museum in Manipur, one in Mizoram, and one museum is also coming up in Kerala, one in Andhra Pradesh and one in Telangana. In fact, all our teams from different parts of the country who are associated with the museum officer as well as the curators, they are also here to see how the...
What about Andamans? Do we have
Andamans has one museum. Archaeological Survey of India. So that museum is under Ministry of Culture. But Government of Andaman is also
Anthropological Survey of India.
Sorry, Anthropological Survey of India. So Andaman government is also coming up a big museum because there are 5 PVTGs community dedicated also coming up.
How difficult is it to attract visitors? Is this limited to people who are studying about tribes, academics who have interest in this subject? Is it difficult to get common people to come?
Most important part is that the museum should be a vibrant museum. So what, under guidance of Secretary of Culture and the National Level Committee, there will be a lot of events will be organized. For example, tribal dances will be there, tribal traditions, cultures, that also will be shown there. Then tribal cuisines, as Honorable Prime Minister also said, is very, very important. So tribal cuisines will also be shown. Then there will be play area. In some of the museums, we are also ensuring that people can come there and stay. In fact, Tribal Freedom Fighter Museum, in nowhere in the world such concept is there. It is for the first time under the inspiration of Honorable Prime Minister. Our ministry is coming up with these museums.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kapoor. We've got the Additional Director General, Department of Posts, Ms. Smita Kumar, with us. Ma'am, could you please share with us your experience of philately museums in India? I know that the National Museum of Philately at Dak Bhavan exists, and you've got some rare and unique postage stamps there. Do tell us more about such museums, and if there are more than the one that I've seen at Dak Bhavan.
Thank you very much. First of all, again, I would like to compliment Ministry of Culture for organizing this event, because for museums, I think I have not come across any event earlier. So it's a good platform for sharing experiences. And as you said, National Philatelic Museum has been functioning since 1968 in Dak Bhavan itself. It was refurbished and again reopened to public in 2011. Besides, we have a number of philatelic galleries, mostly in most of the postal circle headquarters. And we have 78 philatelic bureaus which function in the post offices. So as far as the Department of Post is concerned, the whole ecosystem of museum is part of a larger ecosystem of philately promotion and philately development. And philately, as you know, we are the creators of value in the sense that issuing a stamp is a sovereign function, so we have access to that. And a lot of, in fact, in the National Philatelic Museum, all the stamps from 47 onwards have been displayed there. There are some other stamps also which are not present.
Considering the times that we live in, today communication has taken on a different genre altogether. So before the computers, or before the internet, or before the mobile phones, it was the post that was most critical to communicating. So how is the National Museum using technology or materials or communication concepts to be able to further keep that alive, as well as increase the communication?
Actually, it's a work in progress. We have started with digitization. We already have a website where all the other stamps and all are available. The only thing, it needs a lot of work in the sense that you have to develop a story around that. So that at present we're not able to play so freely. Otherwise, we do have digitized stamps and all. But what I'd like to emphasize is it's not only the National Museum and others museums and bureaus. We also take philately outside the system. We go to any anything important happening anywhere, and we will have a philatelic event associated with the chronicling of. Yes, so you have Subhash Chandra Bose anniversary, and then we go to the school where this Mr. Bose studied, and we display a philatelic exhibition. And we have a very well laid out program of district, state and national philatelic exhibition. We had a national philatelic exhibition in February this year, And for the first time, we played with a lot of technology there. So that gives us some pointers to go ahead in terms of our museums also. We had these immersive experiences that Mrs. Zainul Bhai was talking about. So we had these audio-visual VR experiences for development of science, because you see the journey of stamps is very intricately linked with the journey of a nation, and every important event is depicted one way or other. So we had these immersive experience through VR, and it was a great hit with
even the experience of creating a stamp.
Yes.
You know, graphically being able to represent it.
Yes.
What goes into it? So do you have workshops? Do you have, you know, dissemination?
In fact, National Museum itself is a hub for that, and in states we go to these galleries and the bureaus where we have these workshops and all on how to really enjoy a stamp beyond its use as just a miniature art or something. You know? So if you speak to a philatelist, I mean, there are so many aspects they are so enthusiastic and so excited about. So we do have
worldwide. It's not just limited to India.
It's worldwide. We have WADP, World Association for Development of Philately, and under that, increase of that, there are number of philatelic associations, international ones. We also participate in international exhibitions. So there's a lot of information sharing and information development. So it's a very vibrant this thing, and we engage with children in a very big way. So we have these programs of Dhai Aakar, of letter writing competition, UPU competition. So through all that, and even in the museums, we have these visits from the school children, and we kind of organize audio-visual. We have amphitheater there. We kind of engage in a big way with the children. So I think that is the way forward. But technology, yes, I think we still need to have an agenda clear.
Thank you so much. I think we've covered everyone on the stage. I just have a few general questions which I'd like any of you all to answer. You know, in the last decade or so, museums have shifted their focus towards becoming a more visitor-oriented experience. And you know, museums in India tend to remain spaces that you go once in a while, maybe on a school trip, and then you forget about it. You never go to a museum ever again unless you're forced to. So how are your ministries working to change this? And you know, are they going on to a, you know, and referred to the immersive experience, referred to a tactile experience that is being encouraged worldwide? Are any of the ministries working on those aspects? Would you like, anybody can jump in?
Can I answer?
Please.
So, you know, broadly there are 4 reasons why we think people don't visit museums to that extent in India as they would in other countries which have, you know, a well-developed museum ecosystem. I think the first is the way that we curate our museums. As Adil said, we have a huge repertoire of artifacts to display. But I think the science of curation is still not that developed here as it is in other countries. I'll give you an example of the Metropolitan Museum in New York. They have a very small India gallery. About maybe 25-30 objects are all that they get to display at one point in time. But it's one of their most popular galleries or sections. And the entire sort of story about that is the way that they curate it. You know, they use the, you know, the reading material, they use the lighting, they use the route that people need to take. So it's that part which I think is very important. The second is that we don't have museums as a cultural space. So, you know, there's just the building, there are artifacts, people come, they go through the galleries, they want to sit and, you know, have a cup of coffee, they want to a reading space where they can just sit and, you know, read something with a laptop. So it's not a, it's an inhibiting environment rather than an inviting environment. So it's that environment issue which I think is the second reason. The third is the fact that, you know, museums do not connect to the stories. So you have the same set of artifacts which create one story being shown in different galleries. In one way it's related to curation, but in another level it's related to the entire conceptualization of museums. I have seen in my last 1.5 years of tenure in this ministry that whenever an entity is asked to develop a museum, the easiest thing that they do is to appoint a quote-unquote agency which is, promoting itself as a museum professional, and just design the gallery without even thinking about what content should come there, how should the architecture juxtapose with the content. So the brick and mortar becomes more important than the content. So that, to my mind, is the third reason. And finally, I think we don't publicize museums enough. I think there is some kind of a despondency in the midst of so many important things that we have to do. We have to uplift people from poverty, we have to maintain law and order, we have to create economic growth, we have to, ensure health and education to everyone. The entire Sarkari system has least interest in, creating and promoting museums. So it's a mindset within government also, which is ultimately responsible for this state of affairs. I think this Museum Expo is an attempt by the ministry to address all these 4 problems. And as we go to day 2 and day 3, we will be meeting culture ministers of large states and impressing on them that museums are not just something that you have to do by way of formality. There's something very unique and beautiful, and you have to take that kind of interest in developing them.
Thank you so much.
I think one more point that I would like to leave with all of us here is there are, despite the challenges that have been mentioned, there are very good examples that all of us can learn from, and I can give you 2. One is the Crafts Museum right next door. I was for 2 years the director of the Crafts Museum way back in 2003-05. But that has that immersive experience because it has reconstructed rural architecture. It has a set of about 50 artisans who are right there doing their handicrafts and handlooms, so people can understand what goes into those crafts. And it has, during my time at least, we used to organize these temporary exhibitions. I remember artist Jatin Das had this huge collection of hand fans, pankha, which was